Hello everybody, it is Ebontis, and I'm going to be out of town, but I'll try and get maybe one or two things posted over the next few days while I'm out of town, just a little bit here and there. But I did want to talk about this one because you guys know me fairly well. So when it comes to solo ops, this is obviously something you guys know I will be pretty passionate about. So the developer insight for Codename Frontiers today, and this is for October 16th, is solo ops. So welcome to another developer insight, Codename Frontiers. This time we're taking a dive into solo ops, basically the solo ops category. If you guys saw the previous rework of kind of the hub screen with director, there was like fire team ops, solo ops, pinnacles, that kind of thing. This is what they're talking about here, solo ops. They say they want 10-minute missions that can be completed by single players or fire teams, even though matchmaking is not on. So if you want to do a fire team, you'll have to bring other people with you. They're low commitment options that can still allow you to use the challenge customization to make progress towards better gear, which is good. And they are being built for their experiences to stay fresh across repeated replays. So the problem is you can picture whether you're going into Crucible, that's not really your thing, Strikes or Battlegrounds, you're racing against other players to finish things like bounties and stuff. Solo players don't have a great place to shine and not really a lot that's designed around them. Lost sectors, you go into those, you got to go to the destination, you got to drive to them. Basically, if you read through that little opening paragraph, the options in the game for solo players are not the best. They've done a lot for groups. I mean, Battlegrounds, Onslaught, Fire Team Finder, tons of things, but solo just doesn't have as much of a venue to go hang out in. Well, so the solution, they're going to build a solo ops activity playlist. They want them to launch straight from the portal, have a base play time of around 10 minutes, and each solo ops activity will emphasize the fun of Destiny's combat action gameplay, presenting players with straightforward objectives that focus on gunplay. Solo ops missions aren't intended to be intense tests of build crafting prowess or thumb skill. Instead, we want them to focus on the joy of playing Destiny 2 in an action sandbox in a way that's easy to jump in. So that's kind of the key thing. Click solo ops, jump in. Who knows if there's a playlist or a couple options. Pretty quick to get going. Now, it will support scoring and challenge customization, like many of the other activities that they're working on. As such, this will allow players to make incremental progress toward better and more powerful gear, which is good. If you can actually make progression as a solo player, lets you then later on actually jump into team stuff that could be a little harder, but at least you're going to feel somewhat geared out for it. They're also going to support customizing the difficulty with a wide variety of modifiers, which is also good to keep things fresh. You'll still want to play well in the solo activities. Your score will contribute to the quality of your loot. So score, timing, how well you do, streaks, all that type of stuff will probably be there. But we're trying to construct these missions so that getting a good score is a matter of moving, shooting, and looting, just honestly being on the move, being active, having stuff that works, as opposed to being determined by what loadout and build you bring into them. So if they take that part of it correctly, they want challenge customization in there. They want certain modifiers to be in there, but they don't want a specific build or loadout. The idea there is don't limit me on what weapons I can use. If you incentivize certain surges, that's going to be one of those kind of give and take things where you do lean into builds a bit more that way. If you're just like, hey, primary is good or whatever, if you have some light modifiers, maybe some challenge customization that you can do on the other side to give the enemies a little modifiers. And if you crank up more and more, but it's more just like, how quickly can you kill the enemies? How quickly can you manage the mechanics that are in front of you? And honestly, if you're just a fast solo player, and you can just knock stuff out pretty quickly, you can actually make some progress. If they can land that like meshing of fun and fast and not really limit so much what you bring into the encounter, but as long as you feel like you've got a smooth build, and that's probably a good way to know if your solo build is going to be functional, is if you can go into solo ops and challenge yourself, then something like a solo dungeon could be a bit more manageable if you yourself can stay alive and those kind of things, no matter what you bring into it. If they have like surges and weapons that are very specific to this thing and overcharge and all of this stuff that really narrows you into a build, that's where I feel like they're going to miss the mark. But if they can keep it a little more broad with the modifications to allow you to challenge yourself and kind of bring whatever you want to the fight, that's hopefully where I see this going. Again, cross our fingers, but I'm okay with solo ops as long as they can do it right. Mission variability. This one's a little interesting. So here, you've got another goal of solo ops is to create activities with high variability between plays. Since you'll be playing these missions as a way of making progress toward better gear, we're trying to make sure they stay fresh longer and making them less predictable in what content you see. For example, at this time, they're aiming to have each mission come with a variant of at least 2 combatant modifiers, so picture like Hive and Fallen, and also with a unique objective associated with it, maybe like a fork in the path or something like that, depending on what you go to. Solo ops will sometimes come with optional goals. They may only present themselves once you're in the activity, like the presence of a treasure goblin or passageways to a secret room that would normally be closed. Maybe it's open this time. And again, if you're going for speed and the secret room's there, give and take on, what that does, but probably going to be worth it. They're also scanning random treasure chests throughout the activity, and finding them will get you a bonus to your final score. So it's going to be a balance of like searching, looking around corridors, knowing what secrets are there, being aware of your surroundings, but also excelling in combat quickly and getting your score up with streaks and everything else. It's got to be a balance of both. That's again where I'm kind of curious. Is time so much of a limitation, or is your exploration rewarded and time's not so much working against you? Maybe instead of somebody else running 10 minutes, I run 15 minutes, but I find the extra treasure chest, I find the goblin, I find a secret door that's now open this time. Is that better for me, or is it always about time? Again, that's a question that I don't have answered here fully, and that's one thing I kind of wonder about. Is timed more of a focus, or like secrets more of a focus, or can they balance both of those reasonably well? So one piece of activity tech that we've been working on is dynamic enemy spawning systems. Now, I'll tell you right now, the system runs behind the scenes, monitoring how well you're doing, how long it's been since you've been in combat, and how close you are to getting to your objective, and then spawn squads of enemies when the system determines that you need to be challenged, unlike other activities where enemy spawn cadence and locations are very scripted. And that is one of those things that I was just figured I'd read that sentence first. If you get used to playing certain strikes and certain activities and dungeons, part of it is learning to understand where enemies are going to come in, how the dynamics are going to be for that group of enemies. Do you need to take out the 2 big ones first? What's your focus? Don't get overrun by the little ones. What's your loadout going to be? All that type of stuff. If they're just popping in guys in front of you, behind you, where they may not expect, from the sides, they might flank you, that's definitely going to keep you on your toes. I mean, unfortunately, I worry about like a random death, but if like deaths are not quite as punishing in this, that could probably be okay. And it also could depend on the challenges you put in there, depending on what modifiers you've got. Maybe you're rewarded if you don't die. Those type of things could be there. I just wonder how it's going to feel if all of a sudden you feel like you're doing better and you need challenged. Now, all of a sudden, if you're doing well with your build, they're just throwing more and more and more enemies at you. Interesting in concept for sure, because just the same spawns every single time you do a mission. We all get kind of bored of that. I understand that. So I like the fact that they're trying to be novel and dynamic to the way the enemies spawn. So every time you go run a mission, you have a couple different varieties, like Hive here, Fallen here, different objectives on the side, and then some more enemies will spawn over here. Maybe I got flanked on this run. That does keep things fresh, but it just in how it feels, how difficulties feel, if it just gets to be too many enemies that are just annoying at high difficulties. It's a delicate line, and again, probably going to be some bumps in the road on the way of trying to test this in betas and, patches as we go forward. But at least they are trying to keep things fresh, especially as your single player activities could be on the shorter side. They could be very just, here's A, here's B, kill this guy, C, D, and it's just like walking yourself through a script every time. They're trying to get away from that. That I'm kind of okay with. Visiting exciting locations. So they said since solo ops are part of the core game, it's free to everybody, which is good. They also wanted to take advantage of the fact that across the game, there are many locations that are either not used in free content or underused, despite being a fun place to play. Think campaign missions, think places that you don't ever go, places that used to have an existence. A lot of pretty much, basically there's a lot of architecture and play spaces in the game that we don't go to very often. You're not going to go to random story campaign spots if you don't typically need to. They could use those spaces for, a short solo ops mission and use, geometry and architecture that's already built, lighting that's already done, and then just populate enemies, put an objective, knock it out pretty quick, put some challenges in, you're good to go, little solo ops, bam, bam, 2 quick, 10-minute solo ops encounters before you go off to do something else. Nice little way to feel like even if you don't have anybody on, it's a weird time of day that you can still get a little something done. I'm okay with that. That is, again, where we are in this game. You're going to have the campaign making new spaces, new stories to tell. That's going to be the new expansions we're going to be getting. Seasons are going to be doing some stuff, and maybe the solo ops get a little refresh every so often, maybe with expansions or something. But if they're just going to be using spaces that we already have seen before, but we don't see them that often, I'm kind of okay with taking stuff that's already in the game and putting it to use. They may as well do that, because otherwise it's just sitting there doing nothing. So I'm kind of okay with that. I know that some of you guys may be like, hey, that's just reused content. Well, it's different of reusing a strike over and over and like revisiting a strike with a little bit new coat of paint versus you did a story mission here one time 6 years ago. Let's go spend some time here and actually work through it. That'd be a little different to me. So I'm hoping with what they've got in the idea for different locations, it takes you to places that are less frequently visited in your general loop in the game, and you got some more fun stuff to do. Can they be played with a fire team? Yes. But if you're with a fire team, you should probably go do fire team ops, because that's going to be probably a chance for better gear. There is no matchmaking. Already covered that one. And will they include champions or banes? They haven't locked down any specific set of modifiers that you're going to support in solo ops. And again, when you get into champions, that's very specific loadouts based on the artifact. If you get into banes, I feel like those are a little more open. It's just in how you handle them. I could see banes as something they would support quicker, and they say they do plan to support banes, because it's, run in and melee a guy or kill a guy very quickly. That's something you just need to be aware of your surroundings and play the enemy type that's there. Not that you have to come in with a specific loadout for fill in the blank. That's the difference. So I would lean Banes more than Champions, because Banes can mix up combat a little bit. Champions will force you in a certain loadout, typically outside of what your build is. But if you don't want to force builds, Champions are something you should exclude, just in my opinion. Champions can be a lot of places, but they are kind of old news at this point and haven't seen much of a refresh. So I'm okay if they leave something like this out of there, because Banes probably are going to keep things a little more dynamic, a little bit more fun. And they're not something that you have to build a certain loadout for, or bring a certain weapon for, or have a specific ability for, because at that point you're just trying to tackle the mechanic otherwise. So that is the solo ops. Honestly, for me, kind of a fan. But it all depends on where they land the balance of fun and fast, how limited the modifiers are, how much you can earn, how far can you take the challenge customization, and what gear can you get out of this thing as a solo player that really is going to be equivalent to something you can get on a team. I'll be curious how they do the reward scaling to see how much of a challenge can you put yourself in, and then how much of a reward can you get from that compared to other stuff. I think that's the other question that we're still a bit unsure about, at least on my end. So that's all I got on this one today. That is, again, the solo ops that they're working towards, probably towards, expansion Apollo in summer of 2024. But for now, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I'm going to go do a trip. You'll hear what that trip's about at a later date in the future, so stay tuned for that one. If you enjoyed this one, hit the subscribe button. Find me on Twitter and Twitch, but I'll be back in a couple of days, and you might see other stuff on the channel from me between now and then. Either way, I'll see you soon.